Good evening and welcome to the September 4th, 2018 joint meeting of the Select Board and School Committee, to be followed by the Select Board meeting after a vote on school committee applicants. We'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin tonight, just for people at home, it's 7 o'clock, and today is primary election day. Anybody who hasn't voted still has an hour to get to the community house to vote. I don't know what's better, to sit here and watch this Sterling Select Board and School Committee meetings or run over this community house and vote, but if you haven't voted, please do so today. I want to go over just quickly the rules of this evening. This evening we're here to vote on and make an appointment to the vacancy on the school committee. We have 5 candidates, and I again want to thank them for their application: Heather Goldstein, Jeffrey Klotz, James Ryan, Jill Shaw, and Armand Ray. And what we would, by agreement, what we will be doing this evening is, in just a minute or so, begin by having members of the school committee and select board select a person that they would like to appoint to the vacancy on the school committee. Our voting order is Karen Morin, Tom Lacusa, Melanie Rothstein, Richard Foster, Stephanie Jasmine, Marie Angelides, Ryan Kelly, Bill Lowe, Bronwyn Moynihan, myself, and then Beth Barron. So we'll be voting in that order. It is required to have a roll call vote, and we'll have a roll call vote. And if on the first round of voting, if nobody receives a majority of the votes cast, our bylaws require, there are 11 of us here voting, and so therefore the bylaws require that somebody receive at least 6 votes. If nobody receives 6 votes on the first round, we will, by agreement, eliminate the person or persons with the fewest votes, and we do have a sheet that describes who we would be eliminating by example, and then we'll vote again, and we'll continue that vote until either such time as we're at a deadlock, in which time we'll open it for discussion, or we will make an appointment. So with that explanation, just if there's any questions of members of the school committee or the select board, we're not at this point going through statements or comments about the candidates, but accept any questions? No? All right, with that completed, what I'd like to do is then just ask for votes, and I'm going to call the roll, and a few of us, I'm sure, will be taking votes. So the first one is Karen Morin.
Karen Morin. Heather Goldstein.
Okay. Tom Lacusa.
Tom Lacusa, James
Sorry,
Ryan.
Tom. James Ryan, thank you. Okay. Melanie Rothstein.
Heather.
Okay.
Heather Goldstein.
Okay. Richard Foster.
Armand Ray.
Thank you. Stephanie Jasmine.
Heather Goldstein.
Marie Angelides.
Armand Ray.
Thank you. Ryan Kelly.
Armand Ray.
Bill Lowe.
Armand Ray.
Bronwyn Moynihan.
Armand Ray.
I am voting, I would be next. I'm voting Armand Ray and Beth Barron.
Heather Goldstein.
Okay. 6. If I've added these correctly,
Yep.
Armand Ray has received 6 votes. Heather Goldstein, 1, 2, 3, 4 votes, and Ryan Kelly has received 1 vote.
James Ryan.
James
I'm
Ryan.
James Ryan.
I didn't apply.
And
Sorry.
1 vote.
Got too many people. James Ryan has received 1 vote. So based on our voting system, Armand Ray has received a majority of those voting and has been appointed will be appointed to the school committee. I again want to thank all those who applied for this position. I do want to remind Mr. Ray that it is required that you go to town hall, the earlier the better. It opens up at 8:30 tomorrow to be sworn into the position on the school committee. Are there any other questions or concerns? If not, I'm going to call for an adjournment of the joint committee, if somebody would make that motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any comments about the adjournment? All those in favor? Joint meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, and again, congratulations to Mr. Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. We can just stay in our nice little tight. We do have a meeting of the school committee, of the select board, that is starting directly. No, that's fine. Thanks. Thank you, Deb. So this evening's select board meeting, we have several items that we're going to be covering. Primarily, we have a discussion with the town council, town attorney, and the chair of the library board of directors about the Stores Library Agreement. We'll talk a little bit about that as we move on. We also have discussions about a plastic bag bylaw proposal. It's an outcome of our last town meeting, and we have a couple of other block party approvals, and the large item's going to be a review of the town meeting warrant. And we will also have, I believe, an executive committee meeting, that there is a tentative agreement with a collective bargaining unit that the select board will review, and if found favorably, we'd probably go back into open session afterwards to take a vote on that issue. Okay, so what I want to do, I don't see the president of the library board here, and I did want to give her a heads up. I told her it'd probably be 7:15 because I didn't know how long the vote would be. So if there's no objection, what I'd like to do is start with any resident comments. There are none. Any select board comments?
Yes.
Tom?
All right, a couple things. We got quite a bit of information in our packet. And one of the things that struck me, we're going to talk about is the opioid crisis and the town taking a position to try to reduce the damage. And the material that they said was kind of interesting. It said in the next 1 hour, we'll have 2 individuals die from an overdose. Six individuals will die from an overdose, and 2 children will be born, and they will be starting a process of withdrawing from opioids, which is some pretty serious stuff. In the same hour, pharmaceutical companies will earn $2.7 million on the sales of opioids. And this is described in the article as the worst man-made epidemic in history, in modern medical history. And we're looking at a number of deaths. They threw out numbers between 1999 and 2016, 350,000 deaths, plus another 45,000 deaths in 2009. So we're basically creeping up on 500,000 people dying from this opioid addiction. And that isn't even taking into account all the individuals who are living day-to-day suffering, and the families around them, because they are addicted to this substance that was really brought into their lives because pharmaceutical companies just started producing these opioids, these basically heroin pills, and they were prescribed quite a bit, and overprescribed. And so, tonight I believe we're taking a vote on this, right, Stephen? About, I think we already took a vote on it.
We already took a vote.
We already took a vote to, be part of a petition to try to hold the pharmaceuticals accountable. So, to me, it's just a really important thing, even at this, local level. It's important that we recognize the damage that's being done by the pharmaceutical companies in the name of profit, basically. There's not much more else to say about that.
If I could just clarify.
Yep.
Yeah.
In the packet is a filing, that is the first filing on behalf of the town of Long Meadow being made by the lawyers group on behalf, that we voted to participate in. So that's, just so the people at home know
Okay,
what
yeah.
prompted this out of the packet is a lengthy filing that was reviewed and approved by town council that's being made in the town's behalf this week.
And it's actually a class action.
It's a class
Yeah.
action, yeah.
There's a group of Massachusetts lawyers who have banded together, and there's 100, probably close to 200 communities now that are participating in this. We'll see where it goes, but I think it's good that communities are, who in many ways it's local communities that do bear the brunt of the front lines with the enforcement and emergency responses, fire, paramedics, things like that. It's good that we have an avenue now to have our voices heard to the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. I know you were going to talk about this.
No, it's
later.
perfectly fine. No, I don't have to.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any other comments, select board comments? No? Hearing none. Just move to the town manager report, Mr. Crane.
I'm used to waiting so long. I'm completely unprepared. Usually I get bounced down the agenda. So the first thing I had was the opioid complaint. The second thing was the DPW facility. We've talked a bit about the asbestos issue. It's been reported on. As we speak, our landfill engineering team, which is Ty and Bond, is working on plans to present to DEP to have minimally a stockpiling strategy, which would allow us to bring the asbestos-containing materials to our former municipal solid waste landfill down off of Tina Lane, Bernie Road. In conversations with the DEP, they've been favorable about this outcome. These types of soils, because the material is not friable and not really a threat to human health, but still does have asbestos-containing material, and it has to be regulated as such. These materials are used for capping and contouring landfills, which is what it was going to be used for if we ship it to Ohio. We have the capacity to do this. We are supposed to be moving towards a state-of-the-art cap for this landfill, and have been supposed to be doing that for a number of years, but it's budgetarily been somewhat out of reach. So we are working on developing the plans for not reopening, but clearing a path into the landfill, reopening the access road that was there, and finding a way to stockpile and or just do the overspreading of the landfill, and then the cost to do the engineered cap. And then we will look at those costs side by side with the current approach on the table, which is loading it out to Ohio. There is the third option of potentially keeping some materials on site in different locations and doing some filling with it, but if you do that, you have to have what's called an activities and use limitation, which is a document that gets recorded and basically restricts what you can do on the site in the future. And every time you have to excavate for any purpose and you're in an area where these materials are, it's expensive and time consuming and costly. You need to get environmental licensed site professionals involved. And so the ideal is to take it all off site, and the local option is right now, I think, shaping up to be much more favorable, even with the additional cost of the engineered cap for the landfill, which is something, again, I looked at as two birds, one stone. A side benefit, and I give Mark credit for the suggestion. Years ago, before I got here, we had talked about the landfill being used for a solar installation, and the issue is predominantly connecting it to the grid. But if we can use this opportunity to contour the landfill in a way that it's more laid out more favorably from a topographical standpoint, be more elevated so it's south-facing for a solar array, it'll make it, once the issues of grid connection, get sorted out, it'll be much better suited to do this. So that's kind of a side benefit that we're building into our design. Like I said, we are fully expecting to bring a change order proposal with as much information as we could possibly get to the board on the 17th. It is very time sensitive in that if we don't take an action or choose a path relatively quickly, it will have meaningful cost and time delays, cost impacts and time delays on the construction project, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. So more to come on that. The Adult Center, we've selected Colliers as our owner's project manager. Colliers is also the owner's project manager for the DPW. I will say that when we got, I think, 6 proposals and had a panel of reviewers, including representatives from the Permanent Building Committee, and Colliers was the most highly rated OPM, separate and apart from their involvement with the DPW. The fact, I mean, I work closely with them with the DPW project, but people who have never worked with them all said that their experience, they're doing a couple of senior centers right now, and so I think they'll do a good job, and there'll be some, I think, efficiencies gained by having one OPM for both projects. Westcom, we are in the process of retaining a technology consultant. In fact, I met with the consultant today, and the architecture, if you will, of the technology and communications piece, which is basically, if you think of the technology side as the consoles where the dispatchers sit and how they, in the computer screens and all that other stuff, you've been in our dispatch center, and then the technology, which is the radios and the repeaters, making sure all of that works well together and is a system that is supportable with our budget, maintenance budget ongoing especially, and expandable in case other communities want to join Westcom. So we expect to have them under contract in the next couple of weeks, and that'll be a big hurdle to get through. And then once that's done, once we have a plan that we know we can believe in for the technology communications, we'll start getting ready to make some purchases. And we are also working on one last piece, which is getting Westcom to be a part of the Hampton County Retirement Board. It takes an act of the legislature, but it's one that can be done in informal session. So I'm working with our legislative delegation on drafting that language and getting that done. As you may recall, we did conduct a screening process, and we did find a candidate for executive director that the board of directors really liked, who's been patiently waiting for the final go-ahead, but we wanted to make sure we could extend benefits, wages, wages, and a full suite of benefits, including retirement. So as soon as we get that nailed down, we'll probably have an executive director as well. And as you know, we've been talking about the as yet untitled isolation project. We had a productive session with JGS and Bay Path University, who are also looking into participating in that effort. And there's a grant that I think Bay Path is going to take the lead on, that we will work with them to help program and create some programs or techniques through this grant that will help us partner and bring the word about isolation out into the community, and hopefully make some connections with folks that can really shine a light on this issue and get the people who are currently isolated either out to volunteer or be more social, or be connected with services that they may need. I think that's just about it for me for now.
Does anybody have any questions, Town Manager?
I have one question. Is it possible that Jim over at the senior center could post an update of the status on the senior center project, so that the people don't watch it and are unaware, and they can just see it over there if they know what's going on?
Sure. We don't have anything yet, obviously, because we have to now.
Well, the OPM selected, that's progress.
The OPM, right? The OPM selected, and then so the next step in that. Thank you, Rich. I should have said what the next step is. The OPM is reviewing the architect's contract, which is standard practice for the OPM to do. We know we're going to continue with John Catlin and Associates. So once I've had a chance to connect with the OPM on that, we'll execute a contract for the design with Catlin, and then we'll get going. And I think you're right. It's going to be important for people to have some information about what's going on. Even I know people are really desperate to see progress,
Yeah.
but I just want to manage expectations in that this is the time of the project where progress looks almost non-existent, because it's the design work and the stuff that's kind of behind the scenes.
Right, well, I wanted to share that with you, because I'd had the opportunity to have a couple of conversations in the last 2 weeks with seniors, and that was their expressed desire is status. They don't understand the process. And you're right, they want to see bricks and mortar.
Yeah, I was just saying, if it's some of the same seniors I talked to, it's the day after the election, they were looking for bulldozers out at Greenwood. And that's, we understand completely that the people have a strong desire. They funded it, they want to see it get going, and we do too.
Yeah, they just don't understand the process. More education would help.
Mark, I did have one more thing. I'm sorry, Dan.
Just Marie had a question.
And for Westcom, did we come to an agreement with Scantic Valley that they would be included?
Scanic's all set. It turns out we thought Scanic was just a vote of the board, which Paul took care of. And then we thought Hampden County Retirement Board was the same thing, and they got back to us and said, no, you need an act of the legislature, which was, but apparently it's not a big deal, according to PIRAC, which is the state agency that oversees all that. So we are, I give Senator Lesser and Representative Ash's office credit. They jumped right in. They've been trying to work with their respective clerks to have the legislation written.
One other question on the cap.
Mhm.
I know that you were talking about money coming from the legislature,
am.
but you were waiting for the governor to sign it. Is that still in limbo with the governor?
So the governor did sign the bond bill that has $5.2 or $5.6 million for landfill capping. The bond bills they rarely get released. Money from the bond bills rarely get released. It's more of a placeholder, if you will, from the legislature. And so I've been engaging state level officials to say, is this something that could be a possibility? I haven't made a formal request because in my conversations with them, I do believe that having the plan and the estimate and the buy-in from the select board, if that's the path we choose, makes a much more compelling request to the governor than just kind of, we need some of it, we don't know how much, can you just say yes? So I'm really waiting to nail down the details and submit a letter of request saying, here's a specific amount we need, attaches the engineering report. A lot of those requests go in and they're at least viewed as highly speculative. So the more data and details we have, I think the better our request will be received.
So we should hold off on advocating until you have it.
I think if you bump into Governor Baker, I think it's perfectly fine to put a bug in his ear about it. And that's kind of the groundwork I've been trying to do. Talk to the Western Mass governor's rep and just say, hey, listen, when you see this request, this is why we're doing this. But we're just kind of, and like I said, I think by the 17th, we'll know everything we need to know, be very specific.
Okay, thank you.
Tom?
If that doesn't come,
I'm sorry, I'm next to
if
you.
that doesn't come through, what's Plan B for the burying the asbestos? Ohio?
Well, it would be shipping most of it to Ohio and potentially keeping some of it on site in part. At this
We're going
point,
to talk more about that on the 17th, though.
yeah, on the 17th. But
Stephen's going to bring us a cost analysis of the different alternatives, so that we'll
yeah,
be
and
speaking from numbers instead of just...
I mean, the numbers, the cost is still going to be, jaw-dropping. But, like I said, there's some efficiencies because we're fulfilling two obligations. DEP came to town, or the regional engineer working on with DEP for the landfill did meet with us. I get the DPW design firm, the contractor, the tie-in buy. I get them all in the same room talking. And we've received nothing but positive feedback from DEP on this concept. So we have no reason to believe that they won't work with us to come up with a plan to dispose of it locally. And then the next thing is, at this point, certainly the transport and stockpiling cost to the local landfill would be borne by the DPW project, just like it would be to ship it to Ohio. But we do believe that the capping, which is $250,000 an acre, and potentially some of the handling costs could be borne by the bond bill money if we were able to get that release. So it's got to be done either way.
Tom?
Yeah, just a question. With Westcom, so those individuals working there, at some point down the road, if they retire, how would we split the OPEB responsibilities? Would it come through our town at all?
It belongs to the district.
It belongs to the district, okay. And who pays that? The state?
We pay it through, Long Meadow and Chicopee pay it through an assessment.
Okay,
We pay so Westcom, the district, funded in part by the state
yeah,
through the cell phone surcharges,
yes.
pays wages, benefits, the whole thing. And then we get an assessment annually as one of the towns, and then we pay that amount to them, and then we say they is us. The board of directors is Long Meadow and Chicopee. But the
Right.
board of directors then manages the finances, but the town just pays an assessment, and that's, so in reality, our OPEB liability goes down when our benefited dispatchers become, or if they do, if our benefit dispatchers
Oh, I see.
become employees of Westcom,
Yeah.
then our OPEB liability goes down.
Okay, great, thank you.
Steve, and I just have one question. You said Colliers has been selected as the OPM for the adult center. Is it a different individual, though, than from who's the representing Colliers at the DPW? I think I just want to...
I think that there's layers of, there's a project director, project manager, and then field the person in the field. The person in the field has been working on their senior center projects, so that's different than the person who's working in the field in our DPW. But the coordinator is a gentleman named Tim Alex, and he'll be the same coordinator. But he's more of a manager level. But I think the person doing the field work is a different person.
Thank you.
I just had one more quickie.
Yep.
As Paul has reported, we've done an audit of our telephone system. I think it's the second one we've done, at least since I've been here. And through Paul's pushing and sleuthing, we did find a savings that'll amount to about $5,000 a year, which means the cost of the audit will pay for itself in 1 year.
Yep.
And then the savings accrue thereafter. So I just want to give Paul the recognition for pushing for that and finding the savings in our phone budget, which has been a trouble spot in our annual line item performance every year.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, just quickly before we move to the stores library, just going to go through, take this actually in the order we've published this thing. I'm looking for approval of minutes of our August 20th regular meeting. Is there any comment?
Who's that in? It's not here.
Can't be me.
Oh, it's down the hall?
Outside.
Oh, okay.
It sounds like,
Mark, there is one typo in there.
okay.
No, it's right here.
Yeah.
They cheated me. They think it's, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Steve, Paul.
Under the town manager's report, number 3, the 2 new members appointed to the finance committee should be Ellen Morin, M-O-R-I-N.
It's Eileen.
I'm sorry. Eileen Morin. Sorry. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Eileen Morin, not Moran.
Right. With that correction, is there a motion to approve the August 20th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second, is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, made by Mr. Foster, seconded by Mr. Lucusa. And all those in favor?
I have to abstain.
Okay, so the vote is 3, 4, 2, 0 against, and 2 abstentions. Mr. Lowe and Zangelides abstained. There's also minutes from the August 27th special joint meeting with the school committee. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Motion's been made by Mr. Foster. Is there a second?
Seconded. Yep.
Seconded by Mr. Lucusa. All those in favor? Any opposed? The vote passed 5-0. Okay, thank you. Then now I'd like to call up Rose Crowley, who's our town council, who's going to talk to us a little bit about Stores Library Agreement. I just want to give folks at home a little bit of a background, if I could. So back in the 1980s, I believe, the Stores Library was an independent organization that provided service to the residents of the town of Longmeadow. And what happened is that at some point, and I don't know the exact details, but at some point they recognized a need for providing upgrades to the building that the corporation couldn't provide. People who lived in town back then recognized that there was a vote to convey the facilities to the town. So the town would manage the building. Shortly after that, an addition was put on after a bond was approved. And at the same time, a memorandum of understanding, or actually a contract, was drawn up between the Stores Library Corporators and the town of Longmeadow, drawing together what the responsibility was of each group moving forward. That was I guess, a great working document, but what it didn't take into account is the fact that we changed our form of government about 15 years ago. And the agreement predates that, and it has not been brought up to date. And so the request at this point has been from our town council to go through and take a look at that agreement and how it needs to be modified to be brought up to date so that it's compatible with our current town charter, town organization. And so I think if that's not way out of bounds, Rose, go.
I'd just like to back up a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. The original operating agreement was put in place in 1990, and the library building and the parking facility had been transferred from the store's trustees to the town itself. And the reason for that back in 1990 was so that the town could obtain funding for an addition. the Richard Salter Stores Corporation could not obtain that funding. It had to go through the town, and so therefore what happened was the property was transferred to be owned by the town, and then the stores, or I refer to them as the trustees to keep it simple, the trustees retained operational control through an operating agreement that was drawn up at that time. And so when I was originally approached with this project by the library trustees, by the trustees, because they were concerned that there were certain responsibilities attributed to them on paper in the original operating agreement, that over time the town actually performed those duties. And the problem was that the trustees, by having those responsibilities on paper, were also exposed to liability. So while they did not perform these functions, they were exposed to liability, and therefore they asked to have the operating agreement updated to reflect the sort of the reality of the situation, and to reduce the exposure to liability. So my approach in what is a first draft, and what is, my understanding is that the trustees have received a copy. We haven't had any back and forth. We're sort of in the initial stages right now. But my objects in rewriting portions of this agreement were to retain the involvement and the vital contributions of the trustees, to keep them enmeshed with the library, but at the same time remove responsibilities that could lead to exposure to liability, unnecessary exposures to liability. So essentially the agreement is made up of sort of two parts. One is who does what, and then the second is the right of first refusal with respect to another portion of land owned by stores and contiguous to the library property. So essentially what we did was what I tried to do was just officially make the town have the document reflect the tasks that the town already performs, and have them officially be the operator with all the liability that carries. And then, let's see, the commitment to keep the building as a free and public library remains. The trustees advise the town manager as to the hiring of any executive director. They do not actually obviously hire the executive director. That is a function of the town manager under the charter. The trustees' input is extremely important, and so therefore it's written into the document in this first draft that that they would be involved in that process. The fees associated with late books and lost books would continue to go to the trustees. The trustees would turn around and return that to the library in consultation with the executive director. The personal property, the division of the personal property within the building remains the same as the previous agreement. One area of concern was which of all the personal property within the library, who exactly owns what. So one of the goals of this agreement would be to draw up an inventory so that everybody knows, and it's all transparent, because that's a little bit fuzzy right now. The terms of the will, Ms. Storr's will back in 1905 when she hand wrote it. She donated portraits, her own private collection. She was a great citizen of the town. So those obviously would stay with stores, and then certain other items. Okay, and then the remainder of the document pretty much remains the same. So as I said, that's sort of, the approach that's been taken in this first draft, and we continue to work with, we will begin our work with the trustees, and that's where we are so far.
Great. So before I just open up to questions, I'd just like to kind of fill in the next steps. So after the proposal or this updated version was submitted, I did submit it to the, Mary Rognus, who represents she's the chair of the board of the trustees, as you call them, because my understanding was that the original agreement was just that. It was an agreement entered into by two parties, and I think that the revised agreement would also have to be entered into by both parties to some degree. And so I didn't want this to be a kind of gotcha kind of thing, so they've had a chance to look at the revisions that our town council has proposed based on what Rose has you've just outlined for us, so I appreciate that. And what I'd like to do is just open it up to any select board members who may have questions for you, but then I'm going to ask Mary to join us and just see if she has any comments for the select board, so the select board can kind of get both sides of it. So at this point, I'm just going to open it up with Tom. Go ahead. These are questions from
You did a lot
Rose.
of work. I mean, I can tell all these red lines, you did quite a bit of work on this, so I appreciate your work on this. One of the things you missed is it still has just for 3 signatures of the select board, and there's now 5 of us, so there's a little difference there. I have one question, I don't know if you could answer this or if Paul would answer this, but the amount of money we're talking from fines and overdue books, and I probably pay a big part of that myself, but are we talking about
I believe it's in
thousands?
the neighborhood of $16,000.
16,000,
Last year, I believe
okay.
it was 16,000.
So, okay, it's not millions, so that's good to know. The other thing.
Certainly subject to correction. Yeah.
The other thing is, like you mentioned, there was stuff given to this library, the part of this, the original bequest, and it was some people from their personal collections of different things. Is there anything that needs a special insurance rider to cover those, and versus, because I know whenever we may have something of real value that wasn't really discussed.
Okay. I believe that there is coverage under the insurance policy. If I recall correctly, I think there is, I believe it's a fine arts coverage.
Correct.
Okay.
Fine arts,
And
okay.
that would cover the materials within the library.
Okay, great, that's all I had, thank you.
Thanks, Marie.
I have 2 questions that are sort of related. So you said you originally started working with the Board of Trustees in regards to liability issues. When was that?
That was 2 years ago. Yes.
And what were the liability issues that they expressed concern about? Which
Um,
liabilities?
Well, specifically, those concerning employees or injuries within the library, whereas the town actually, maintained the facility, and the town hires and fires the employees and pays the employees. If on paper they have that responsibility, if the trustees have that responsibility, any type of hostile work environment complaint brought forward, or any type of injury within the library, those types of things. And whereas the town, the town charter contemplates throughout the town that the town manager ultimately hires most of the employees, it's kind of a situation where that's how it works. My understanding is the town manager, together with a panel, puts together a panel, interviews candidates, and that the Board of Selectmen actually approve it. So if one of those employees went amiss, on paper, anybody suing would also go after the trustees. And so that was the type of liability that, as it was explained to me, they really didn't want to be exposed to.
Was there any other reason you were going back to the contract and reviewing it? or was it all around employee issues?
No, I was literally handed the operating agreement and told that it just didn't reflect reality anymore by a member of the board who was tasked with just sort of explaining their concerns. Now, from there, I went through the agreement and I looked for all potential liabilities, things where I felt that, when you have control, you have liability. If you make a bad decision, you make a bad choice, you are negligent for something for which you have a duty, liability exists. And so as I explained, what I tried to do was to retain the authority of the trustees to weigh in, but not obligate them to weigh in. So, for example, there's a provision where, in the new version, where if there are any problems, if there is anything that they spot that they feel is a problem, they may, but are not obligated to report those problems. So in that way, there is no legal duty for them to report problems. So that, I looked at every line of this contract with that in mind and tried to preserve the involvement, but exclude the liability.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had one question. The part about advise the town manager during the selection process of any new executive director, the word advise can be taken by many different people to a different level of involvement.
Yes.
Stephen, do you feel comfortable with that language? I mean, you will deal with it, we won't.
Sure, I think, Richard, in practice, that's how we do it.
Okay.
And the select board confirmation extends to the executive director as a department head under the charter. Department heads are subject to select board confirmations. But in practice, when we went through the most recent executive director screening, we did invite the chair of the board of trustees to sit in on the interview panel, and that was great. It was great feedback. I agree that, and similar when we hired actually the last two COA directors, I've invited members of the Council on Aging to sit on the interview panel because I do think it's important where, if Barry Jarvis won the lottery tonight, I'm sure that a member of the Parks and Rec Board would be invited to be in a panel to select her replacement. So in practice, that is how we do it. When Rose presented the draft, she was looking for liability issues, and I think she did a great job articulating them to Paul and I. One of the things I was looking for was to say, how does it work in reality? And the document should really reflect how things operate now, or we should change operations. And I thought that she did a good job balancing the two, and that the document reflects how the relationship currently works.
Well, that was my feelings too, because I know the word advise can, as I say, somebody can come and say, hey, I'm here to advise you. And that basically implies you better listen.
Right.
And follow my words.
So,
and that's why I just want to make sure the town manager, you felt comfortable with the way that's written.
I think.
But it is valuable to have the advice. I just don't want perceptions being out there where somebody feels that they have authority to dictate something that they do not.
So I think that, so if you play that out, if I can hypothesize, if I just woke up one day and said, I'm just going to make do all these interviews by myself and make a decision by myself, the board of trustees could, advise me, say in a letter that I should have somebody from the board of trustees on the interview panel, and they would probably copy the board on that as their way of advising. So I think there is a check and balance, which is the reason why I think it's important to have the input up front. And I know Jean and Karen before her, and I think all past directors have attended library board of trustees meetings, and the department, the library executive director, I think generally presents the department budget to the board of trustees for review and input before it gets delivered to me as a part of the town manager's budget. So I mean, there's lots of ways where we do this on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
I just want to underline one thing that you said, that wasn't quite correct, but I hope in the future it does, and that was the member of the COA was not invited to the last interview round.
The
So-
liaison to the board was
Still-
invited to.
Still needs to be the COA, so I
Right.
think that in the future is an important thing too, which you said is a tradition, we'd like to go back to that. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I'd like to invite Mary Rogness to just come up. And Mary, you and I had a couple email exchanges, but just so everybody understands, what my goal here this evening is for us to hear, you've had hopefully a chance to look at this, review it with some of the board members. We're not negotiating this evening, folks. This is not a negotiation perspective, but it's just a kind of first glance. What are your, how do the trustees of the library perceive the proposed change, and what would you like to, if in a perfect world, have different from what's in that proposal?
Well, I have a statement that
Okay.
I'd like to read. And for start, I'll just say thank you for inviting me tonight. I'm Mary Rogness, and I'm president of the trustees of Storrs Library. The document before you says the board, quoting now, wishes to enter into a new agreement. Actually, we had no knowledge or participation in its drafting, and we do not wish to enter into it. Our library currently operates under the 1990 operating agreement between the trustees and the town, in which the town appoints Storrs as the sole and exclusive operator of the library. It is a 99-year contract, and it remains the sole agreement between the trustees and the town regarding the operation and management of Storrs Library. The 1990 operating agreement can only be amended by the written consent of both parties, not by the unilateral action of either party. We call upon the town to bring itself back into the compliance with the provisions of the agreement. The adoption of the town charter has no effect on the contract, which pre-exists its adoption. We thank Ms. Crawley for her work, but believe the new draft is inconsistent with both state statute governing libraries and the intention of the parties when they entered into the operating agreement, and also the clear language in the agreement. It goes against the traditions of Storrs Library as a public-private partnership with the town and is contrary to the operating model of most libraries in Massachusetts. The first Richard Salter Storrs Library opened in 1910, funded and built by private citizens in accordance with the will of Miss Sarah Storrs. Ownership and management continued until 1990, when the trustees deeded the library and parking lot property to the town to enable issuance of bonding for the addition. The operating agreement protected management rights, as well as giving the town the valuable right of first refusal on the sale of any remaining portion of the trustees' property. Libraries in Massachusetts are governed by Mass General Law, Chapter 78, part of the education section of our laws. That makes it more like schools and DPWs or Parks and Rec departments. Like schools, libraries are governed by boards, committee in one case and trustee in the other. From Boston to the Cape and Brookline to Northampton, boards of trustees have custody of the libraries. Changes to this practice can be made only by local laws. Strange as it sounds, under the statute, quoting now, all money raised or appropriated by the town for the support and maintenance shall be expended by the board. And that's Section 11 of Mass General Law, Chapter 78. Trustees look forward to meeting with the Select Board to discuss and resolve issues of mutual concern. In this regard, we will be meeting with our council at our regular meeting on September 13th. Our every hope is that mutual concerns will be resolved expeditiously and in a manner that reflects the good relationship the parties have always had and the best interests of the library.
Thank you, Mary. I'd just like to make a couple of comments if I could. For many years, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years at least, I've been aware of the operating agreement, the 1990 operating agreement with Storrs Library, and it felt that it wasn't reflective of our current charter and operation systems of the town. It wasn't able to be consistent with the current operations and charter of the town. Everything from the way we budget, and I just recall the one item I remember is it says, the library trustees shall prepare a budget to present to town meeting, who shall either approve or disapprove the budget. That has not happened, to my knowledge, since the day the town meeting form of government took over and we went from department head to a town manager form of government. And I'm not sure that, when I shouldn't speak for other people, but that we're prepared to go back to that operations where the Storrs Library trustees are responsible for the entire operating budget of the library. So, I understand your position. I understand the position of the trustees of the library. My intent here is that we need to get something that is compatible with the current charter, with a strong town manager form of government, where the town is responsible for the employees, their salaries, their benefits. That, nowhere in that operating agreement does it indicate that I know of, and yet the town has taken over that operating liability. And so I think there's a whole...
Actually, it does.
And
The existing agreement.
okay, so, I think the town, we need to reach a new agreement, and I appreciate your desire to get into a discussion. I don't know the best way to do that. I was hoping that at some point we'd take this, if you will, as a first pass and what may become a multi-month long negotiating process. I'm hoping it's not a multi-year negotiating process, because I think that we do all have the same end point in mind, which is to be able to operate a library that's a benefit to all the people in the town of Long Meadow.
Thank you, Mark. I have no interest in debating this and going into it tonight. As you said, that's not why we're here. I did want it stated for the record, and we are happy to negotiate and talk about any changes to the agreement. In fact, we have been trying as a board to get the attention of the town for a few years now, at least probably since I've been on the board, and I've been on for 6 years. And we have gotten no response from the town about changes that need to be made. But the board, or the library, is not changed by the town charter. In practice, things have been changed, but the operating agreement, which is a contract, was signed by the head of the library trustees, Janie Friedman at the time, and the 3 selectmen who were the selectmen for the town.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll meet with anyone, talk with anyone.
Okay, well, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a
Bill?
question. Did the trustees not request a change to the document?
We've requested that it would be looked at, that we haven't asked for what's been proposed to you. No, because it actually removes all function of the library trustees except for paying the bills. It allows us to keep paying for insurance when we have no responsibility for anything. We are already covered very well for liability. I don't understand why we were talking to Rose about liability concerns, because we have good liability coverage.
Well,
No, that's-
just by way of explanation, this did occur 2 years ago, and the sort of general task described to me was we want the agreement to reflect the reality and reduce liabilities. Now, I interpreted that, and I went through the document, and that resulted in what you see before, well, what we have as a first pass. And so, so I think that there is definitely work to be done, and things to be worked out. So, but it has always been my impression that that we are at the beginning.
Mhm.
So,
Tom?
I guess there's really no timeline for this. It's kind of a document, so we could take a series of months to
Well,
get
I
hammer
anticipate
this
it will
out.
take a while. I'm hoping
Yeah.
not an inordinate amount of time. But
Yeah.
what I'd like to do is lay out the next steps so that we all understand it. And from a practical point of view, Rose, with all due respect, we're trying not to run up our legal costs on this, and so I think we need to understand that, I look at this as, if it becomes a negotiation, it becomes something the select board needs to look at, and that's why I asked that it come before the select board, that the select board take a look at this, and just like we have with any of our other negotiations, we assign, in this case, generally the town manager to say, here are the guidelines, here's where we want you to go, you're representing the select board in the town, please come back to the select board with what both parties seem to agree on. And I think that's what I'd like to continue to do with this, but recognizing that, okay, Mary, on behalf of the library trustees, you now have a document, I guess, pardon the bluntness, but the ball's in your court, and to, the document clearly reflects the thinking of our town council and our town manager, and I think it behooves you to and that's why I was hoping it behooves you to let us know what areas you'd like to, not get into with this negotiation, or where you'd like to go. At some point, if it takes more than a couple iterations, I think the select board ought to take another look at where we are with this. But I think that was my approach to this whole topic, was to let's get a couple iterations going, come back to the select board, and let the select board weigh in based on what has generally called kind of a tentative agreement. Bill?
So this may have happened already, apologize if it hasn't, I'm not aware of it, but it seems to me that you would come forward with your concerns of the contract, and then those would be addressed. Now we have a document that somebody spent a lot of time on that doesn't fit with your thinking at all.
Well, we knew nothing about it being developed, so we had no ball.
So, if I could just weigh in on that point, because that's not consistent with my remembrance of the process. Rose is correct in that we had a meeting with members of the Library Board of Trustees. I don't think Mary was there, but it was the chair at the time, and a member who I don't know. I don't think she's on the board anymore. And it was correct that the Library Board of Trustees initiated this process. And that's, again, the conversation that Rose had with them was based on liability reduction. The process took longer than I think we would have liked. I certainly didn't have it on the front burner for me because the library operates, as it has for many years as a department. But I had reported to the library board that council was working on it, and we were expecting a draft at some point in time, and that's how we operate. There's an issue that we want to have council's opinion on. We ask town council, and they report it back to us as the client. So I thought there was an awareness that this was in process. It's true that a draft was not sent to the Board of Trustees, but that's because the select board and the town are the client. I think that usually the select board wants to see these documents first before they generally get shared. And that's the past practice for most situations, not just the library operating agreement. So I thought there was a broader understanding that this was something that was in progress, and that when we had something from council that the board was going to review, we would share it with the board of trustees, and that is exactly what happened.
So the moral of the story is get an agreement with the trustees you have while you can get the agreement with them, and don't wait till the next round of trustees, because you may be starting over again. And I think that to a large extent I'll accept that that's where we are right now. And so again, I hoping that we get to a point where there is an iteration or two at most, and just a matter of, it's not going to be a matter of days, it's going to be a couple of months or a few months, but hopefully this is back on the burner and everybody understands this is going from. I'm not looking for any decisions this evening. I'm not looking for any direction from the select board. I was just looking for everybody to become aware of what's going on and hopefully get the proper people in the right room so that we come up with a document that can be, meet the needs of both parties, and that's ultimately what an agreement does. Any other comments?
Okay, we'll have our people talk to your people.
I guess that's the way it happens. Okay, Richard?
I have a question. I must have missed a lot of meetings. This happened 2 years ago?
Not here. We met in Town Hall. Rose, myself, and members of the board of trustees met, and they asked to take a look at this.
I don't think I was present for that
Oh, you were?
meeting. No, I think I spoke to you, and then I met with a member just to sort of.
Okay, that's right. So we met with boards of trustees, and then I think I referred them out of council, and you were assigned to it, that's right. And then you contacted the member of the board of trustees who was representing the board of trustees at that time on this matter, right?
Okay, so this has never been before our board.
Nope.
Okay, I was wondering why.
But there had been a discussion, I don't remember what it was, but there was a discussion about, I think there was a directive for me to work on a new operating agreement
From who?
from the board.
Yeah,
From who on the board? Did we ever take a vote on such an issue?
I believe we did. It was several months ago that it had been sitting out there for several years, and we talked about it to bring that back on the table, and that was, I think, about
Yeah, but-
5 or 6 months ago. You might have been out of town in February.
Yeah, because I really don't, I'm totally out of space on this. I'm sitting here in total amazement of what I've heard tonight, that people don't seem to be communicating, and then I thought, well, I don't know what's going on either.
Richard, I'll tell you, from my perspective, this has just been a long-standing discrepancy
Yeah.
between what we had and what we need, and I don't recall that we anybody told me we need to move it up. It's just that I thought, it was an item that I wanted to get resolved during this year.
Oh, I understand, and that's where I'm a little bit puzzled too, because I would have thought that there would have been board involvement instead of one person.
That's why there is now. It's the best I can tell you.
Yeah, I hear the barn door slamming. Okay, maybe that helps me in my confusion then. I feel better.
Okay, so anyway, thank you, Rose, very much for coming and representing the town, and thank you, Mary, and the other members of the trustees of the library. Thank you. Hopefully this will continue moving forward, and I'll try to make this an item that we kind of check on from time to time.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. And then I want to move up on our agenda, Marie asked to move up on our agenda, the discussion about our plastic bag bylaw. And Marie, since you're kind of channeling this thing through the system, I'll let you just take over and talk a little bit about the origin of the recommendation and what it says.
And thank you for moving it up. In the Springtown meeting, it was voted on to have a plastic bag ban in town, but there was no bylaw that was created. It was almost like a directive from town meeting. So we talked about it at the Energy Committee, and a young man, Tommy Townshend, was interested in the issue, and he sort of came on as a unpaid intern and said he would do research on how this is being handled across the Commonwealth, because there are multiple towns who do have the plastic bag ban. And it was decided that there was looked at some of the issues and problems they've been having out in Cape Cod on the way they described the plastic bag, and so it ended up that they were creating heavier plastic bags that were also being thrown into the dump. So it was recommended, many towns have said, we wish we had done it in a more descriptive way of what the recycle bags were. And so this bylaw was written to solve some of the problems that are out there and try to reflect what has been trying to get through the legislature for the past few years, so that if it finally does get passed, there's no conflict between the two. And so we looked at it, and we actually voted on it as a committee to approve this draft. And back in July, I contacted the health, what is it called? The health committee?
Board of Health.
Board of Health, and told them that we really need to get that heard through them. And I still have not gotten on the agenda for it, but we were looking to get this on the fall town meeting, which means we needed to get this through the select board and approval, or any recommendations on changes that you had for it before we continue down the process.
Can we ask questions about it?
Oh, you can ask questions. I just hope I can answer them because
Where it says reusable grocery bag and manufactured for at least 175 uses, where did that come from?
because they wanted to stop this, the heavier plastic bags. You know, when you go to a clothing store and they get you the heavier plastic bags? Well, they were saying that that could be for, 15, 20, 25 uses, and that is just what other towns have used. So in other words, instead of going to heavier plastic bags, it would be something more like what you get, the semi-fabric ones that they're now selling at Big Y.
Just seems odd that somebody came up with the number.
Yeah. Any changes people recommend, we'll be glad to look at it before it gets to the Board of Health.
Yeah, when you buy cold cuts and they come in those little bags, they'll be using wax paper
No,
or something?
those are not included. If you read it, in other words, when you go to buy your produce or your meat, those little tiny plastic bags for
Those green, yeah.
sanitary, those are not included. And the description of the plastic bags that are only the ones that you put your groceries
The
in.
grocers do.
Mhm.
Okay.
Or even takeout, I would think.
Right.
The one other thing is where it came up with no more than one penalty should be imposed on a store within a 7-day calendar period. So if it's $50 and I want to use plastic, I'll just give you $50 every week.
Well, I don't think that no, grocery stores have been doing this across the Commonwealth. I don't think they keep plastic bags in order to, I think what they do
No, I
with
mean, I
it.
don't know if people would do that.
Yeah.
It does say $100
big
for second,
grocery-
$100 for
That's
second
not a
and
big deal.
subsequent, so it's $100 a week, but that's beside the point. So,
Yeah.
Marie, I have a couple of questions, and it starts with, I guess, the approach that our energy task force is taking on a plastic bag bylaw. I thought that was a little of a stretch of our energy task force, and I know the energy task force has extended their name to energy and sustainability, and I'm not quite sure what that was, but my sense was it was more in the energy sense than it is in some of these things, so that kind of concerned me. But the other comment I guess I'll make is that I think we may be outside of our element trying to put together a bylaw by this manner when we're on the verge of a state law that's going to do it anyway. But more importantly than that, I think we've got to get it back to our town officials who understand the process, whether it's the Board of Health. I guess they're involved with it. I'm not quite sure why it's the Board of Health, maybe because it's nobody else that we know of who has jurisdiction over plastic bags in
Well, they were in
stores.
charge of the recycling bylaw too, so I think that's
But
why I was told.
maybe
they
it's
had
our
to go through there.
recycling commission that would do it. All I know is that having said, gee, we had a volunteer came in and wrote us a bylaw that we want to go forward with is a little bit difficult for me to buy into, I guess.
Well, again, any changes you feel, it's got to go through.
The problem is I'm not knowledgeable enough to know what the impact of this is. I think, clearly, I don't know, ask the folks at Big Y, the Moores, what do they see as the positive side, recognizing if we're going to do this, what's it going to take to do this?
We don't have a choice.
What?
We don't have a choice on whether we're going to do it or not. It's already been voted on to do
Voted
it.
on.
Well,
But are we going, but the bylaw we passed, Richard, I just don't know enough to say whether this is appropriate. I mean, Bill pointed out a couple of things, how do we arbitrarily pick 175 uses makes it a non-one-time use bag? Maybe 160 uses makes it a non-one-time use bag. Because that's what the bylaw says. If you can use it 175 times or more over and over again, it's not covered under this.
I was going to start a new industry of making bags that are 175 uses. Insider information,
And
right?
I'll tell you, from my perspective, if you want to be in, how can we pick and choose, this bag's an okay plastic bag and that bag's not an okay plastic bag because somebody says one or the other things? I mean, Tom's point, I think, is, if it's a plastic bag, it's a plastic bag. I mean, that's just from my perspective. How do you move things around? That's why I'm saying, did we get the right people involved in putting this together? And are we trying to push something more quickly than we're prepared to? And do we instead turn to our professionals in town and say, okay, you've got this, and here's what this energy group came up with, and who are you recommending we have review this so we come up with the right thing for the town meeting? And if we don't make it for October, we'll make it for the spring.
So, to Richard's point, this has got nothing with plastic bags. What was approved at town meeting was, I know in the view of town council, the in effect of a sense of the town meeting, basically a non-binding resolution. Because the citizen's petition was not drafted as a bylaw. If the citizen had drafted bylaw language and it got approved by 2/3 vote, we'd be in the process of implementing the bylaw. But it was basically a statement that says town meeting wants to ban plastic bags, and it's not again about plastic bags. It's about following our process and the rules of our local governance structure that need to be followed consistently. And I did have this conversation with town council, and he said that you don't have to do this. Now, my view, talking to our state legislators, is that the state is probably in the next session going to take something up like this, because communities are, Northampton already has it, I think Amherst has it now. I mean, these things are popping up one after the other with the plastic bag bans, and so I think people have an understanding that this is kind of where things are going. So we could take action on this. I would recommend it be a bylaw for the Springtown, for the annual town meeting. I don't know that anybody's asked the local businesses to find out how it's going to impact them. Doesn't mean you have to. But I just think that there's, I'd want to know from the state, are they going to preempt whatever we do, and are we going to spend time doing this only to have it preempted later? But it's really, I just think I somewhat agree that I don't know, I don't know if we have enough input on local impact. Doesn't mean you can't. I mean, we can still do it. It's not. Truthfully, I think it's going to end up happening one way or the other.
Marie?
My understanding is they did talk to Big Y, and Big Y says they're already doing it in other towns, and this is how they're doing it, and that's what it was reflective. And then also, we did speak to our legislative people who said, no, nothing's going to happen this year. And
This year,
to
but
go, to go ahead with it. Well, we could also sit by the next few years and see if it ever gets done, but I felt that what all we were doing was to get a draft going so it could be passed to the various groups and get moving, and I knew it was going to be difficult to get it through the select board and the Board of Health and back to town council, and sure enough, things are not moving this summer. I've had this ready since mid-July in trying to get this heard and moved through the various groups. So this is like a draft recommendation, so we tried to get some of the work moving forward.
I, by the way, think that we should do this. I mean, I got the clear sense of talking to people in town that they are really for this.
Yeah, Bill, I don't see any problem with it. I think the issue is, so where do we
Need
take
some
this
work.
draft, and how do we move forward with the draft? Richard?
Well, twice I've been confused tonight. The question is, are we going to make it a bylaw or not? You said it was a non-binding resolution. Has this board ever made a statement that we're going to say we're going to put this thing together? And if we're not, then Marie, I wonder, the energy you have is fantastic. You did a wonderful job, but if the board's not supporting it,
That's why it was brought to the board.
yeah, but I mean, it seems to me the board should have said, we want this committee to work this up and start to work on it, or like Mark said, get a professional, whatever. Do we want a warrant article for the annual town meeting with this attached? That's the question.
I think that's a great question to have, and maybe we should bring that before our board, although tonight we can't because it's not state it as a vote, we can certainly
Put it
do
on
that.
next agenda then, if you don't, and let's get it.
Is there a sense that we want to do that, Marie, is that what you were hoping to do, is to
Yeah, I was
drive this
hoping
forward?
to
Okay.
get the board's approval of not only the bylaw, but also the process.
Well, even the process first, and then, it sounds like whoever, you can't make up what's in this document. There must be standards that have applied this, 175 uses. These terms, they're not made up, I'm sure, and the man did the research, or your intern did the research. But I hate seeing you come in here and have to defend the document when this board's never even said they even wanted to start with. So we need to get our act together.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, Marie, I think you're moving in the right direction. I think this is what the town has asked for, and it's our responsibility to follow through on it. And I think it should go to the Board of Health, and then come back to this committee, and we should vote on it. And if people don't want to vote for it, the town will know you don't want to vote for it. But I think our responsibility is to follow up, and get this thing moving. Like you say, other communities have stepped forward on this, and there's no reason we can't. We do have a lot of businesses that use plastic little packages, I guess you'd say, package stores. But we have a few places that use plastic, and I think we should move forward, so.
Then you'll get the
That's my
opportunity,
feel.
you'll get the opportunity to vote next
Yeah,
time. we have a
yeah,
meeting.
I've heard the sense of the
Okay.
group, and so Marie, what we're gonna do is bring this forward to this, for a vote at our next select board meeting on whether or not we're gonna pursue this as a bylaw. Stephen, yes?
So just from a process, again, going back to a process standpoint, the first, in terms of this bylaw, I don't know that I've submitted to town council, but there's really no reason it couldn't be on. Again, I don't know how much outreach the Energy Committee wants to do, but if they feel this is good to go, if you put a vote on next week, you might as well put it on the fall town meeting warrant. And then, if that's the case, I'll send this to town council tomorrow for his review as well. But if that's the way we want to, if that's a timeline you want to proceed on, that's fine.
What's the deadline for warrant articles?
Next week?
Last
Or
week.
this,
Yeah,
Next
that was
meeting,
today.
2 weeks.
It was actually last week,
Yeah.
of August.
Well,
Right.
we'd be negotiating and voting on something tonight that was not on our agenda.
Right. Stephen, I
I'm saying voting
appreciate
next
that,
week.
but
if there's a sentiment that we want this for the fall town meeting is all I'm
and
looking for.
I'd rather do it right than do it quickly, and,
Okay.
right now, it's had all of 5 sets of eyes, or whoever's on your committee, maybe it's 10 sets of eyes, but not, town council hasn't looked at it yet, the health committee hasn't looked at it, even our recycling committee group hasn't looked at it. I'd like to get a couple more sets of eyes on it, and I think the process by doing it that way will allow more sets of eyes to look at it and offer and they may say, looks good, looks good, and we delayed it 5 months, and to me, that's okay too. All right. So with that discussion, I'm gonna leave this on and for the next agenda, a sense of the board on whether or not to move forward, okay?
And I'll tell the committees that might want to have a say, whether it's recycle or energy,
I think,
that it'll be discussed.
if it's a proposed bylaw, we ought to get anybody who believes they have knowledge to give us some potential input, because what you don't want to hear about is on the floor of town meeting.
Any should we send it to planning, any other groups that you go to?
Oh,
Now just recycle and Board of Health again?
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
my sense.
Yep.
Right, and thank you for moving it up, sorry, I had to
Yeah.
leave early.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We have the next item on our agenda is the State Retiree Benefits Trust Fund. We actually voted a couple of weeks ago, or a month or so ago, to move our OPEB fund into the PRIT.
Managed by Prim, into the PRIT.
The PRIT, right. But unfortunately, they said it didn't have the right vote, and so Mr. Pasturzik has provided us with a plethora of documents that are all necessary to send to the state, and Bill, I'm not going to give this, but what we're looking for is a motion to accept all of those documents that were sent to us, and I guess Paul, can you just talk briefly on where those came from?
Yeah, I'll start at the very beginning, that with the Municipal Modernization Act at the end of 2016, opened the window
That's the motion.
for communities to vest in the State Retiree Benefits Trust Fund. At the May of 2017 annual town meeting, we took a baby step by re-accepting the OPEB trust fund statute, and then beginning last February, I started working with a representative of the what's known as the State Retiree Benefits Trust Fund to get everything lined up in order that we transfer our funds to be professionally managed by the people over at the state who are managing billions of dollars worth of investments. We were basically just rolling over CDs, getting 1.5%. Now would be professionally managed. So anyway, we got the warrant article set that we had to do, and all these documents were prepared in the meantime and sent to the state. As you may recall, I reported that the state actually accepted all these documents in our application at a June 7th, 2018 meeting. And we had thought at that point in time, or we knew that there was a 90-day waiting period for the state to actually accept the town of Long Meadows funds. Well, back in mid-August, the representative contacted me, and he wanted some type of proof that the select board had actually, or these documents had actually been filed with the select board and the town clerk. And, my response was, were they filed? I've made mention of them. I kept you folks informed, so on and so forth. And I asked the gentleman, I said, you had sent me all the procedures and process requirements. I didn't see that anywhere. Can you point it out? And basically what he was told is this is something new that their legal counsel is requiring. So, we're kind of stuck with that answer, legal requirements. So I said I will get it to the board ASAP. I actually sent it to you folks via email in the latter part of August, but just to make sure that, that's going to, or that didn't meet the so-called filing procedure process that they require, I said, why don't we have the board vote on it and have there be no stones unturned, that we get this 90-day waiting period started and we get this process moving forward and taken care of. So that's where it is right now, and hopefully this vote will take care of it and we can get the clock started again.
So just for the record, Paul sent us 5 documents. One's called the Certificate of the Clerk, the other is the Certificate of the Trustee, which named Cheryl as our trustee, our town treasurer. Another's our town council's opinion. Then there's an investment agreement, and then the trust agreement. So those 5 documents have all been sent to the board. We believe we've seen them. None of them require our signature, but we need to vote on accepting those 5 documents. So I'll accept a motion if there is one. Bill?
Yes, I move that the Long Meadow Select Board vote to acknowledge and accept the other post-employment OPEB trust agreement dated the 16th of May, 2018, and other related documents associated with the town's application to have its OPEB funds invested with the State Retiree Benefits Trust Fund that were included in the Select Board September 4, 2018 meeting packet.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Third.
My motion's been made by Mr. Lowe and seconded by Mr. Lacusa. And Bianca, do you have a copy of what he
Yeah,
just
I gave
read?
her a
Okay, great, okay. So, is there any further discussion?
Yeah,
Tom?
discussion. At one point, it mentions trustees, and there's 3 names. It's Cheryl and there's...
Cheryl is
the only trustee. She's the only trustee.
At one point, they had...
Yeah, you're right. There is a document that has Cheryl, the assistant treasurer collector, and then it was certified by Kathy Ingram, the town clerk.
Right. And so my question is just that if funds if there was going to be any, would they need 3 signatures to do anything with that money? Like if they were going to have money from that used for anything else, would it take 3 signatures? That's my question.
No, it would only take the one.
Would just take the one?
Right. Cheryl is the sole authorizer.
Yeah. And is that standard practice?
Given the fact that we don't have any investment decisions, we found that to be the easiest. If we had a board of trustees, they really wouldn't have anything to do because the money's going to go
Right.
to Prim or Pritt, and they only offer or they only take this money and put it in one investment. So we could have you know, 15, 20 people and hold elections, but it really would serve no purpose. So that's why I kind of chose the one person, let's get it done, and let's cut out the red tape as much as we can.
So Tom, if I can just short circuit your
Yeah.
question, the question I would have is, withdrawing money from this for
Yeah.
use by the town, how does that get done, and who's authorized to do that? Is that,
Well, I guess my question is, you know, we have one person, and if they just say, well, you know, send it to this account, there's no other person who would have to
Well,
sign off.
we would certainly know that. I mean, one, PRID or PRIB gives us a monthly report.
Yeah,
So we will get a copy of that monthly report on a monthly basis, according to the agreement.
right.
So we know how much money we currently have. So again, we would be able to see any authorizations of money going back and forth. It's not my intention of withdrawing any of this money in the near future.
Right.
The only thing that, it's an irrevocable trust, the only thing that we can use it for are for the health insurance benefits of retirees and/or their dependents.
And so the folks who have this money, or, you know, we're investing and so forth, wouldn't sign off to go to any other account except OPEB, basically.
They-
Scannick Valley is the only
They
place.
have what is known as a core fund.
Yeah,
That is, and their core fund, I'm sure, has multiple investments in it, but
Yeah.
they only allow the communities who are investing their OPEB funds to invest with them into that core fund.
right.
So there's no real decisions for us to make, oh, we want, you know, 25% to go into bonds and 75% into stocks. We don't have any of those decisions. The only decision we have is to go with them or not go with them. They do all the investment through that core fund. They manage that. So they're not going to ask us our opinion if we want to buy GE stocks or GE bonds or anything like that.
Okay, so I just, in terms of policy, you know, having one person sign off, so doesn't raise any eyebrows for anybody else, I guess.
No, it raises eyebrows for
Mr.
me. I was
Foster, yeah.
waiting to
Richard.
speak. Where's your embezzlement protection on this? With having one person that can direct those funds?
Well, she has authorization to do any transfer.
Well, okay, well, where's your embezzlement protection period? And say she decides she's going to send us an overseas account and it's gone in 2 hours and we're not ever getting it back.
She gets on a plane.
Well,
We
the only
trust
thing we have
General.
is we have insurance for that. That's the only thing I can say, but she can do that with general fund money also.
Well, I did equally as bad. I mean, where's the protection built into our system? There should be some protection built into our system.
As
I mean,
far
that's
as-
from my feelings.
As far as a secondary signature
Yeah,
on the
Yeah,
transfer?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why funds would ever go out under one signature in the total fund sources that we talk about in the millions of dollars.
yeah.
I mean, even petty cash at places that I've been at, a lot of times required 2 signatures just so you wouldn't get pilferage.
Right. Again, I could ask them their process for transfers, but I'm pretty sure that there is not a secondary signature or acknowledgement required by the assistant.
I would be, maybe it's the wrong time, but I mean, I'd be concerned about internal control that we have in place. And why that wouldn't be red flagged by somebody as saying, you don't have enough control over that.
The annual audit reviews our internal controls.
That's what I mean.
And we always, I think, come up pretty favorably in those reviews, our internal controls. I think, don't we get transfer confirmations and
There are transfer
Statements and things like that that
confirmations,
show.
you know, there's
He said
monthly
once a month,
reconciliations,
though.
but I understand what you're saying about, you know, next day to some offshore, you know, account. Let me inquire about the secondary signature, but I don't think, to have the secondary signature here, I don't think it's gonna have an impact on the transfers to the trust funds.
Right.
I
It's
mean,
just the money going
it's
out
a
of the
whole-
trust.
You're talking in a broader sense.
Right.
With the transfer, so I would have to get back to you on those procedures, but I'm pretty sure it's only one signature being required to make those authorizations.
Right. The point it had, it was just brought to my attention just this week, and you may have read the article too, that there's a new scam on mortgages that are taking place, where overseas scammers are reading the emails from the firms, and when closing is getting close, they start targeting the person buying the home and saying, if you had a change in accounting, we want you to ship your money, wire your money to this thing, and they actually follow up with phone calls telling her that it's an official email you just got. It's a brilliant nickel-dime scam, but apparently they're netting hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's going to offshore accounts, and they're non-touchable. And there's no, in the banks, it's not, there's no insurance for it. Nobody covers it. And it's just instantaneously done by a wire transfer.
So I think the discussion here has identified something beyond the OPEB issue.
Sure it
here.
is.
So I'd still like to move forward with the vote on the OPEB with the kind of, Paul, I think you got the gist
Yeah.
of what we're trying to discuss here and see where we're going. I don't think anything's coming out for a while, so.
No wieners.
What?
I say no wieners out of the machine. Huh?
No, not yet. So anybody have any other questions?
No.
Okay, I'm going to call for a vote then. All those in favor of the motion, which essentially says we've accepted these 5 documents, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Vote is 4-0 to approve that. Paul, thanks very much. And we'll follow up with.
Right, I can get their written procedure on transfers.
Yeah, we'll do that. The next item on our agenda is a pretty quick item with the approval of the Young Mansion for, to move into a commercial operations. There's a house behind the Young Mansion. The Young Mansion is 734 Long Meadow Street, and there's a house behind it at 734R, and always has been. The concern is that 734R may appear to people to be the rear entrance, and they're looking to change their street number. There's one of our bylaws, it's chapter 200, section 4-201, numbering of buildings. Select Board has the authority to regulate the number of buildings on or near the line of public or private ways. Essentially, it gives us the authority to change the numbering of the building. The resident of the building has asked that their address be changed from 734R Long Meadow Street to 730 Long Meadow Street, and I was just wondering if there would be a motion to that
Yeah,
effect.
I'll place a motion that we approve this request or act favorably for this request of an address change.
Great, is there a second?
I'd second that, but
Go ahead.
then I have some
Comment,
discussion.
discussion, yeah.
Is this is in the historic district, does it have to be looked at?
It's not appearance, it's strictly a post office thing.
Yeah, straight. So the driveway for the Young Mansion actually belongs to the carriage house, which is 734R. And so the mansion, the owners of the mansion, the residential owners, retained an easement over it. But the frontage for the carriage house was basically the width of that driveway. So the driveway is, I put in a diagram, the site plan. The driveway is going to stay, and they're actually going to separate it so it's exclusively for the use of the residential property. They have now, if you've been by there, they've actually cut in the parking area in the driveway, and it's going on fairly well. So there'll be a separate dedicated driveway for the 734 Long Meadow Street. And so this now that you have a separate entrance and driveway, Dr. Lamb wanted to have a number that was distinctive to his property, which makes sense. And I think the last time we did this was on Booth Road, if you remember that. Booth Road, Booth Street, the guy who came because he had his packages were all getting messed up.
Yeah.
So this is, I felt like a similar request, and in the context of all the changes that happened with the property, it made sense.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
for it, I just want to make sure that we're not.
Great, okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments,
Well,
questions?
does this set by the town, the post office, the mail folks, they don't need, they'll just go whatever. We could put.
We'll turn the certified minutes over to Dr. Lamb, the requester, and he'll have to go do what he's got to do to get his mail. It's, not, it's the owner's responsibility.
All right.
Okay.
I mean,
We've done-
it makes
we've-
sense.
Like I said, we've got the authority by bylaw to do it, and done it before.
So does it make a difference if we do it 32 or 30 or 30 and a half?
It needs to be something between the last number and 734, and
Yeah.
essentially, we said to him, what would you, he said 730, we said, fine, I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter.
Because the last time we gave an exact number.
And we're giving the exact number now,
Oh, okay.
730.
730.
We're
Okay.
giving the number 732.
What you're suggesting we give him, yeah, it's kind of 730 or 32, depending on how you feel that day?
25 or 64? No.
Okay, all right, enough of this. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve this change? Any opposed? Vote is carries 4-0. Thank you very much. We now have to go to our quarterly appointments. For the last 3 meetings, we've been interviewing candidates for, to fill board meetings on boards and committees that are appointed by the select board. We have a number of vacancies, and if we can, I was just gonna, Debbie House has prepared a document for us. We've actually, the first one is energy and sustainability. We've got 4 candidates and 3 openings for 3-year terms, 1 opening for 2-year terms. So is there a motion to appoint anybody here? I'll accept the motion. Does anybody, do you have the, Bill, go ahead.
I make a motion that we, that Robert Kapner be given one of the 3-year terms expiring 6/20/21.
Second.
Well, you can do all 3 if you want to. Kapner, Martin,
Did any of them
Marinelli.
request what term they wanted? I don't remember.
No.
Well, then was that seconded, or do I have to
Go ahead.
revise
Well,
them?
why don't we, I just soon revise it, just do them all at once, you know.
Okay.
Do
So-
the Energy and Sustainability Committee all at once.
Yep. Then I say, make a motion that Robert Kapner, David Marinelli, and David Miller be given 3-year terms expiring 6/20/21. And make a motion that Andrea Chason be appointed to the Energy and Sustainability Committee for 1 2-year term expiring 6/20/20.
Fine. The motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Foster. Any discussions?
On those motions, you read 6/20/21, should be really,
6/20.
it should be 6/20/21. Because he would have it expiring on June 20th.
No, I think he said it is 6/20/21, is that's the year.
Sometime in June.
Right, he says, so they would be expiring on 6/20/2021 instead of 6/30/2021. You follow what I'm saying?
I understand it, but he didn't say 6/20/2021,
Oh,
did
I thought
he?
he did.
Is that what you said?
I said 6/20/21. I didn't.
Okay, I thought you said
The day.
6/20/2021.
The intent is that it
Sometime
expires the last day of June 2021, and the others expire the last day of June 2020. Okay? That clarification, all those in favor? Votes 4-0. Recycling Commission, is there a motion?
Clerk.
I make a motion that Virginia Ryder be given a 3-year term on the Recycling Commission, term expiring 6/30/2021.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded by Mr. Foster. All in favor? Votes 4-0. Thank you very much. Tree Committee.
I make a motion that Patrick Carnahan be appointed to,
And we have 2.
and Stephen Steiner be appointed to 3-year terms expiring 6/30/2021.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. All those in favor? Passes 4-0. This one's a little trickier. We have
Well,
2
I
people.
would make a motion that Jerry Plum be appointed to 1 3-year associate term, the Zoning Board of Appeals, term expiring 6/30/21.
Second.
Any comments? My comment would be, both Mr. Plum and Mr. Minchon are current member, were past members, I guess, of the ZBA, and one of the reasons they didn't apply is because they literally didn't get the message that they needed to reapply, and I'd like to suggest that we also appoint Mr. Minchon a non-voting member of the ZBA to keep him involved. There's a lot of training, expertise, and experience that comes along with this. Unfortunately, you know, we are where we are, and having appointed somebody else to fill one of those seats, but I'd also like to suggest that we do that to bring him along. Mr. Foster.
Would we first have to modify our policy and expand that committee
No,
assignment?
as a non-voting member, he
Okay.
can be that. I just wanted to make that comment. We need to vote on the motion that's before us, and then maybe there would be a motion to appoint Mr. Minchon as a non-voting.
No, I was just after the administrative part, Mark. to make
Yeah,
sure we did-
I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay. So there's a motion made and seconded to appoint Mr. Jerry Plum to the 3-year associate's term on the Zoning Board of Appeals. All those in favor? Any opposed? The vote passes 4-0. Is there a motion on Mr. Minchon?
Yeah. I propose Mr. Midtown be placed in a non-voting capacity, for a three-year associate term,
Yeah.
I'll second that.
expiring June 30th, I think, 2021.
I'll second that motion. All right.
I said a question
Discussion.
about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um,
That doesn't mean he can't be appointed to a full-time term should one open, and
But does such a thing exist?
it does when we created it. We appoint to this.
But I guess to build on Richard's point, does a non-voting position exist in the bylaw? And I don't know the answer to that. And the other thing is, it's Mike Michon. Has anybody asked him if he wants to be appointed to something where he can't vote?
Is, edify me, I don't have a copy of my charter. Is this covered in our charter? The zoning
No,
board?
ZBA is not in the charter, it's
Okay,
bylaw.
so it falls under our management.
Yeah.
And I wondered the same thing, pardon?
ZBAs generally, I think, are covered by state statute. Zoning boards of appeal are one of those boards and committees like planning boards that I think
We appoint them, though?
you appoint them, but their membership may be in the bylaw, and I just don't know. It's not like the energy committee where you can kind of
Right.
make it up as you go along, because it's kind of an ex officio, an ad hoc type committee.
Right.
ZBAs are a regulatory body, so it's not. It's just a little different.
Yeah.
And honestly, I know Mike was interested in serving again, but put him on this thing. He doesn't want to show up to the meetings because he can't.
Right,
vote.
but
He just
I
doesn't know what
wanted to
do.
keep him involved because there will be an opening, and I wanted to get him back onto the
Yeah.
meeting.
I don't think associate members even vote.
No. Yeah, they're non-voting members. Well, we can leave it as it stands, Mark, and Stephen can double-check the regs on it and advise us next meeting, and we can change it
And
at that point.
I just don't know the process. I mean, you can just say,
We can just vote it and see if it holds water.
Yeah. Yeah, and Stephen, you can advise us by next meeting if we're wrong.
Because or do you want to just hold off on the vote until next meeting? I don't
Well, let's take the vote on the assumption we can do it.
Yeah.
And then if we can't, you'll let us know, okay? Okay, so there's a motion to appoint Mike Minchin as a non-voting associate to the zoning board of appeals. And it's been made by Mr. Foster, seconded by Mr. Lucusa. Okay, all those in favor? Vote passes 4-0, thank you. Thanks, Richard. Next item on the agenda is a block party request for Captain Road. I don't know, you folks have it in front of you. It's a request for a block party for, the best I can tell is Sunday, September 9th, with the
September 8th. and
September
with a
8th, with a rain date of September 9th.
Yeah.
Is that a motion, Richard?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay, is there a
I
second?
place a motion, we approve the modified permit.
Okay.
I'll second it. Yep.
Okay, motion's made and seconded for Captain Road for the, for a block party. All those in favor? Vote passes 4-0. Thank you. Oh, yeah, so we've got to sign that. The next item on our agenda was to close the fall town meeting warrant. So, and, we need to take action on closing it, but, or we can discuss it. What I'd like to do is get some fairly quick feedback on the discussion of the town meeting warrant items. And so, Stephen or Paul, I don't know which one of you want to kind of just walk us through the
One by
current
one.
draft of the, right.
We'll ham and egg it.
Article 1 is basically a bill of prior year. What had happened is we had discovered that there were some timing issues with bills that were being paid or not being paid starting in at the end of FY16, and they were actually presenting us a 13th month bill at the end of FY18, and because it was the 13th bill, they actually did not have enough money to pay it. So we held up and we said we would go to the voters for a bill prior year, and hopefully we will get this appropriated in the fall so we can pay the waste hauler for what we owe them for services they provided in June of 2018.
Does anybody have any questions about that extra bill for, I assume that's waste management, right?
Correct.
Okay, no questions. Article 2 proposed as to,
Article 2 is again, it's a bill of prior year. We found an infraction, a small minor infraction with the Fair Labor Standard Act provisions. And speaking with and we rectified it in FY18. And speaking with Labor Council, they suggested we go back another 2 years to find that that same practice had originated back in those, or had been being done in those 2 years. And we have found some amounts of infraction for those 2 years. I haven't completed the audit yet, so I'm just putting in a small placeholder. It's not going to be a lot of money. I will complete the audit, and we will have the bill of prior year to pay for any of the minor infractions that I discover in the audit of FY16 and FY17 of that departmental payroll.
any questions? Okay, Article 3.
Article number 3 is a standard article where we have to put away 10% of our community preservation funds into the certain reserves that the CPA have. Those reserves being for open space, community housing, and historic preservation. And I've estimated that the 10% of the revenues is $44,100 for a total appropriation $132,300. In total, again, one-third going into those particular reservations. That's a requirement by statute of the CPA law.
So, Paul, this doesn't spend any of the money, it just moves it from the CPA into each individual
Basically
bucket?
moves it from an undesignated type of category into those specific areas that it must be spent in at some time in the future. It does not spend any money, it's, in essence, a transfer.
Okay, thank you. Article 4?
Article 4 is basically the DPW, we bonded, in the month of August. These amounts are needed to cover our debt service for FY19 in those specific funds as itemized. Again, based upon the bonding that was done and the debt service projection, or the debt service final numbers that came out. These had not been appropriated prior, so we need to pay these to get some first years of interest paid, and the general fund has a small principal payment.
Any questions for Paul? I have a quick question on the, I thought the allocation, or I guess I didn't know, but the allocation to the sewer enterprise and the water enterprise fund are not equal? And that's,
They're not equal because I don't want to say we had to adjust, the payment schedules because there were openings in different years within the current debt service for water as opposed to the sewer debt service. So they're not identical, let me put it that way. So as an example, in FY20, we may be paying $300,000 of principal out of water, but only $100,000 out of sewer, as an example.
but why did we choose to do that instead of equalize them, though?
We did that so we didn't, again, just like we do with the tax rate, we try to manage the tax rate. What I tried to do is manage the water and sewer rates. So as an example, in like FY20, there's a huge drop in sewer debt service. So what we tried to do is not make any type of large principal payment in FY19 for water, as an example, and we bundled it, a lot of it into FY20, so that we'd have a smoother debt service going off into the future.
Are those numbers compatible with the debt numbers we used for setting water and sewer rates?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you. Okay. Article 5?
Article 5 is kind of a cleanup article. I don't have, as you see, I don't have the exact number from available funds in the Treasury. We'll be taking the final steps and closing out the FY18 books next week. And when we have that free cash number, I will be looking to transfer, per your policy, anything over $500,000 in free cash into the Operational Stabilization Fund. I am also proposing, you may recall that we only use 2.25% of the levy limit. That it left about $93,000 on the table. It is my proposal to take that $93,000 into the operational and put it into the Operational Stabilization Fund. I kept it separate because I know that'll be a debatable type of process as opposed to not going up to the the full 2.5%.
So Paul, I just want to clarify. So we're going to be asked when we set taxes in November or December, the tax rate, to set a tax rate that's 93,000. I've got to reword that. That the amount of money we need to raise is $93,000, that we need to raise is $93,000 below our maximum amount. And rather than tax at that $93,000 lower number, you're suggesting we tax at that amount, but put that money aside so that next year's budget, if you will, has a $93,000 cushion over the, I mean, is that
Not necessarily a $93,000 cushion, but one of the things you may recall that Moody's has repeated in their opinions of the town is that our reserve levels are not, I don't want to say they're not equal to like-rated AA2 communities. So in essence, I know there was a goal not to raise the full 2.25% and keep it out of operations. And all I'm saying is, you're right, that did not go into operations. I'm recommending that you take that money, it's not in operations and it doesn't have to be done, but I'm recommending you take that money and you put it into reserves. But you're right, if we don't do this, we would have $93,000 left in taxable revenue that we could have had, that we would be leaving on the table, and the people will not get taxed at that rate.
But more importantly, if we don't do this, in 2020, our tax rate can go up by 2.5%. But if we do this, our tax rate can go up by 2.5% still only. Plus, there's this $93,000 that this year we put aside that theoretically is available next year for budgeting.
It will not have any impact on what we can raise in FY 2020.
Not on what we can raise, but it will have on what we can spend. In other words, let me just use some numbers here, Paul, because I'm trying to understand. Let's say our taxable rate this year is $1 million, okay? Our tax ceiling this year is $1 million,
Right.
okay? And next year it becomes $1,025,000, right?
Right.
Okay, so if it's $1 million this year and we only are raising $93,000 less, does that mean that if we don't do this, we can still raise $1,025,000 next year?
Correct.
Okay, so this really is taxing people $93,000 simply to put it into the reserve account.
Yes, it is.
And we could in fact lower the tax rate.
Yes, you could.
Okay. I guess that concerns me because we keep talking about not using the full 2.5% of our tax limit.
I knew this would be debatable, but I'm throwing it out there, put it on the
Did we
table.
Vote on that?
Yeah, I thought
We
voted
did,
on
but Paul's now using that extra, I guess, 0.25% to put it into our stabilization
I am
fund.
making that suggestion.
Right.
it. Yeah, I mean, I just think it was clear that we said because of the enterprise fund for the stormwater, that we didn't need this money and that it would delay us reaching the levy limit if we could only do, 2.25, and so I'm surprised this is here. And I guess I wouldn't support the change.
Any other comments?
I think it's very smart to do that, but on the same point, I have people constantly telling me, my taxes are too high,
I don't think we'll ever catch the communities in terms of reserves that they have. Especially if values don't improve.
Right.
Or values stay relatively flat. So even though Paul is right in saying that this helps well, first of all, it helps us in case of, dire fiscal situation in the future, we have reserves, but it also helps us when we know we're going to be going to market again in the relative near future for the senior center. So it helps us with that. At the same time, the stated goal of getting enough reserves set aside to satisfy Moody's, I don't think we could ever achieve.
No, we probably
Thank you.
can't. Paul, what's our operating stabilization fund balance, give or take?
think it's at least $3 million.
Okay, so we're talking about adding $93,000 additional to $3
Well,
million.
plus, well, again.
Well, we're going to add, we're
Right.
going to add the excess
Right.
free cash. I mean, that kind of comes with, that's part of our policy. Anything over $500,000 goes into operating stabilization. The question is, do we tax to the full 2.5%? And I'm not sure we need to take a vote on it. I'm hearing at least two people, I agree, that I don't think this was our intent. Richard, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this or
I
not.
I pretty well share what's been said.
Okay, so, well, I guess the direction is to take
Cross
out
that
that
off.
$93,000, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 6 is I ran into deficits this year with the health insurance for employee account and the liability insurance account. Some of the employee health insurance account was covered by the retiree health insurance account, but even the combination of those two left me about $55,000 short, quite honestly. Overall, both of those are built into a function that has debt service and other employee benefits. In total, the function itself was only slightly in the hole, the $1,800 that's mentioned there. The liability insurance account, I was in the same predicament. We're getting large increases in our liability insurance account. I think just what I've seen thus far, I think they went up over $70,000. The liability insurance account for FY19 did have an increase of $35,000, but I would just like to see some of that in order to cover the FY. What I'm going to say is if things continue, it's going to be a bigger deficit at FY 2019. So I'm just trying to get ahead of the game a little bit here while we have the money. Now, this money here is raise and appropriate, and it's basically coming from the excess money that we got from the state. The state, from the numbers that we had used in the FY19 budget process, the state actually came in about $165,000 higher than what we had used. So this is also some additional levy capacity. And again, I'm asking you to plug a hole that I know is going to exist at the end of the fiscal year.
So that was my question, Paul. Raise and appropriate means we use it out of all of the revenue sources you identified and not just out of a tax base. In other words, because I was going to suggest that the state revenue is going up. Can't this come out of the rate?
Exactly, right.
So raise and appropriate covers that additional.
Right, this is using the state money, so,
Okay.
right.
All right. So, okay. I mean, it's bills we're going to have to pay. And again, you said this was FY19, not FY18, right? You were saying this year.
This is for FY, a projection for FY19. Again, 18 ended up in the hole already, and again, I've seen the increases mainly because the bills have already been paid for liability insurance. I'm just anticipating that we're just going to go further in the hole in FY19. Health insurance, it's one of those things that at this point in time, the teachers have just started and can't itemize all the changes that we have thus far. They still have to the end of September before new teachers come on board. So I don't have exact counts on which to make a final adjustment there, but status quo is, again, the employee health insurance account was in the hole $111,000 by itself. Some of it was covered by the retiree health insurance, about $49,000 or so.
Okay. Proposed Article 8, which is $37,000
Article
for.
7 is a request from the police department to put in 6 in-car video systems for video cam purposes, basically. Dash-mounted audio and video recording systems. Again, you can read what the chief had written in that regard, in that explanation there.
So, I don't know, I have concern about Articles 7 and 8, both of which appear to be, and I don't know if it was 9 too, but both appear to be capital items. And again, I'm not sure if this is a definition of capital item, because I don't know how long these things are going to last. But looks like we're taking on fall town meeting, putting in capital expenditures, and I guess the question is, where was this, and why did this come up now that wasn't in the original budget? Maybe, Stephen, that's a question for you rather than.
Yeah, I think that in the case of the police department, they've had a higher level of focus on technology and cameras and things like that. They, as you may recall, that they had submitted a request for cameras in the capital plan that was not recommended by the capital planning committee and did not get funded. Obviously, they are like the school administration, highly focused on safety and security, but they need to have a plan that we can understand and know, basically the limits of what they need to have a plan for how they can deploy this. I think the dash cams are to some extent an offshoot of that broader conversation about camera deployment in the community. The plan for the cameras on buildings is going to be forthcoming probably in the next year's capital plan. In the other two cases, I believe that these are, I don't say equipment failure, but the need for the replacement equipment is much more pronounced now than it was back in, almost a year ago when the capital plan applications were done. Because, the needs for FY19 get submitted basically, and they get prepared October, November. And I think since that time, the the one Bobcat we have has failed since then.
Right.
And the grinders, I haven't talked to Pete about, but I'm sure it's something that the wear and tear is more evident than it was when they did the capital plan a year ago.
Well,
Which is, we've done capital type items, and there is a capital planning committee coming up, and I know that these items will be presented to them if the board, is interested in keeping them on the warrant. But we have done capital items in the fall.
Right, the
several
issue is,
times.
Article 7 is a raise and appropriate, so it's not,
Article 7 uses a part of that $165,000.
which $165,000?
The extra 165 from the state, Mark. There's Article 6 and 7 that roughly eats up that $165,000 from the state.
Well, right, but, it's still our money. I guess the question is, is this the sense of we got money burning a hole in our pocket, let's go spend it? Because, this is, and I'm not saying $37,000 isn't, or this isn't a good use of the money. The question is, if it went through a capital planning process, where would it fall with anything else? Is this just because, somebody got a chance to put it into the fall town meeting? And I guess that concerns me. The process is supposed to rate this or rank this relative to other needs of capital, and somehow this moved outside that process.
Yeah, I agree. It's somewhat going around the system. Now, if they'd weighed in on this, but they don't have next year's program, so I tend to agree. This is a bad move to move in this direction. It's not saying anything about the request. It's just to say they're being brought in under the cover of darkness and funded, and it's going to take money away from other capital projects.
Well, it's not, because it's not coming out of the capital stabilization fund. If somebody said we're going to take this out of capital stabilization fund, that'd be different for me, Richard, than saying it's going to come out of raise and appropriate.
Right.
It's we want to bypass the capital appropriation process by moving, because we can, because we know about this, we're going to move to the head of the
Right.
line, get ourselves funded out of raise and appropriate.
Right,
instead of
we're increasing the capital program. You're putting more money into the capital.
in essence.
And the price of these two items is about $77,000, and we just talked about, $93,000. That we, said, well, we could put that much in the Operation Stabilization Fund. So, yeah, it's a fair amount of money.
So can I just separate the two things for a second?
Yep.
Dash cams are something that would be a public safety enhancement. The chief's done the research, he's worked with the IT department, and is ready to make a proposal. We only get to ask for money twice a year. So I think, I know he believes that this is a public safety enhancement, and with some funding available from the state, to me, it makes sense to at least ask if there's support to spend the money. The other two are more, like I said, I don't say equipment failures, but they are equipment timing out. I think sooner than expected. The Bobcat, like I said, just quit, and that's things you can't predict when you're doing the capital plan, but it's a needed piece of equipment. And that's generally when we ask for capital in the fall. It's usually something to replace a piece of equipment that has failed or is in a state of wearing out, like the channel grinders, those are necessary pieces of equipment.
I also don't think, it does say raise and appropriate because we had the opportunity to use it, but I don't really think when the police chief asked for it, it was me who came up with the source. He would have, just give me any kind of money anywhere.
Right,
So
right.
it just happens to be raise and appropriate. And I guess my question would be, and it may be premature, if you do eliminate it, can I then move it into Article 5?
Why would you do that?
Why?
Yeah. If we eliminate it, we're saying we don't want it.
Again, you had a goal of $93,000 to stay under the levy limit. You're at $93,000.
Well, yeah, but that's...
No, you're talking about if you're not going to support the funding for 7, then the money that is
Goes into the operating stabilization
Goes
fund.
over-
That, not into the 93, it goes to the, it just becomes
Right.
excess money
Right.
and gets,
Right, well, the thing is, I think you're distorting. I think Mark hit it right. It's not gone through capital. It's not been
I
vetted.
completely understand that.
I've
But I
already
think
answered
But I'm speaking. But I think that needs to be done first. Just because somebody walks in with a brilliant idea all the time doesn't mean it should be funded outside the scope of our capital review committee. That committee's there for a purpose.
Rich, I have no problem with that procedure. These come to me. I feel it's my obligation to put them forward. I'm putting them forward. All I'm saying is that if you folks decide to take off this $37,000 out of raise and appropriate, would you mind if I then put it back, that $37,000, not the 93, the $37,000 go into the operational stabilization fund? That's my request. It has nothing to do with the process or anything to that nature.
so my understanding, to answer that, Paul, was that we were looking back at 2018, and free cash in excess of $500,000 will go to the operating stabilization fund. Whereas I thought that Article 7 was actually raise and appropriate in FY 2019. And so it's because we're raising, whatever we raise and appropriate in 2019, if we spend it on this or we don't spend it on this, it ends up carrying over next year. This time we'll be talking about the result of that in free cash, won't we?
No, because you're not doing anything with it. You would have, if you do not utilize it for either one of the purposes we're talking about, then you don't have that money. It doesn't affect FY20's amount you can raise, but you lose the opportunity to expend it in FY19. So instead of being $93,000 under the levy limit, you're going to be $130,000 under the levy limit. And that may be a position you want to be in. But if you don't expend it, you've lost it for the year, only the year. You still have the opportunity to raise that in FY 2020.
Okay, I understand. Okay. I guess my other comment, Richard, is, and to some degree, Stephen, this answers your comment, is, are we at a point where we ought to be doing capital planning twice a year instead of once a year? Once for the spring, once for the fall. For example, I got to believe that we have capital projects that weren't fully expended at what we thought they were. All the articles say money not expended will be returned to the capital stabilization fund. The question is there money in the capital stabilization fund that could pay for channel grinders, skid steer, and/or these video systems? And if so, should we be looking at a, if you will, a twice a year kind of process, and then let it go through the, an evaluation by the capital planning committee? Because if there's not enough for all three of those, which one do they see as the most important? I'd be pretty comfortable doing that in terms of, look, we have money in the capital stabilization fund, and instead of just carrying it over to the spring, we know we need it, let's appropriate it now.
Again, I think they are going to meet with the capital planning committee and present these to them. I think their meeting is the 12th or something like
I'm
that.
not sure the meeting
It's next week, but
their
they,
intent is to bring it to the
to
capital
bring the
plan.
capital planning committee. It's not going to look like the 5-year plan with the recommendations, but they are planning to present these items to the capital planning committee. So by the time you minimally get to town meeting, but even perhaps before the warrant is signed, you'll have capital planning committee's input on it. That is going to happen. But in terms of the process, again, I want to separate equipment failures or needs that emerge post capital planning process that need to be addressed when you only get to ask for money twice a year, and things that we have funds for, and, you know, maybe an enhancement. I agree with you on the dash cam thing. I do think it's worth asking because it is a public safety enhancement, but, you know, if you want to see that in the traditional capital plan, you know, I wouldn't object to that. It's the equipment that has failed or it needs to be replaced before it fails that I think we have to have the ability to ask for those in the fall, since we only get it twice a year.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I just think the process needs to be that we evaluate that versus the other thing is, Paul, my question to you is, if it came out of the current capital stabilization fund, then it's not a raise and appropriate, it's a transfer, right?
Correct.
So then, at that point, then, to my understanding, it significantly changes this. We're transferring it from capital stabilization fund to a capital item that the capital planning committee said we need because we can't wait till the spring to appropriate it, because if our sewer system goes down, we're, as you know, backed up a little bit. So,
But can I just say something, though? And Rich, I know both of you were on the capital planning committee. They're advisory to the select board.
Mm-hmm.
So to say that you won't consider something unless it's gone to them first, when ultimately the select board makes a decision whether it goes to town meeting or not, I mean, that's not how we've traditionally done it when things like this have emerged. We have tried to go to the capital planning committee every time, even in the fall. I know the fire truck a couple years ago was an example of that. The ambulance last year, I think, was another example of that, where when things come up, we do go to the capital planning committee and get their buy-in. But I just think that there has to be some kind of consideration for, it's still the select board's decision, and the select board can ask all the questions it wants of the departments or me or anybody else. But to say you simply won't consider something that hasn't gone to capital planning, you know, in a situation where we need to replace the equipment in an off-site.
We're only talking about the one item, though, not the other elements, right?
Okay.
well,
But I can get that feedback from
there's three items.
Yeah,
I
there's
see.
3 items. Well, we're still only talking about the CAM. We haven't issued the up to...
Well, no, I've
talking
moved
about all
on to
three as
talk
well.
about all three.
Okay, well, then your appropriate discussion then.
So the
But we
question is, Stephen, do you want us to now sit here and say, let's get the details on all three, and first of all, find out how much is in the capital stabilization fund, let's get the details on all three and decide what 1, 2, or all three of them we can afford. Do we want to pay for it out of capital? Do we want to pay for it
Okay.
out of raise and appropriate?
Yeah, and honestly, this is why we do the preliminary look-see at the warrant, to get these questions out that we didn't have a
But
chance to
that's not a
answer.
discussion of the warrant,
Okay.
that's a bigger, different discussion.
Let me clarify one thing, though. My concern was only for the dash cams.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me, I'm sorry.
Right, it wasn't the other ones. I totally agree, but that was something new,
Okay.
and, you know, I'm sure everybody has something they'd like to throw in this warrant.
I say no to people all the time.
I know you must.
I have that no button on my
Okay,
desk.
can I ask
go
one
ahead,
more?
Rich.
On item, of course, item 7, it seems to me we've likely spent, what, $500,000 Emerson Road in the last 3 years?
We spent a lot, I don't know exactly how much.
And I just sit here and I have to say, why wasn't this in that $500,000 that we spent? I mean, how deep was our research? It sounds like this is something that's got like a 7-year life sign that's going to wear out. I just, why?
That's
That's
Article
all.
8, that's actually Article 8, but
Yeah,
yes.
'cause, well, I told you I was slipping
Right.
on, because there was a lot of angst that went into that plan. That was an enormous amount of money put into Emerson.
I don't believe that they did anything with the channel grinders. All those improvements, we tore down the old digesters, which place looks amazing now with all that stuff's gone. We upgraded the power, new pumps, new things like that. And why didn't we lump the channel grinders into it? That's a question for Pete Thurber, quite honestly, or our engineers. But
Well, I'm asking the manager
Yes.
of those people, because
I don't know the answer to that question.
I
but-
have to believe that you as the manager would ask the same question too, if you're thinking about the last 4 or 5 years, because we've spent a tremendous amount of money down there.
Well, I wasn't aware that there was a 4 to 6 year life cycle
Okay.
on the pump, on
And
the
also,
channel
yeah,
grinders.
that's not much of a life cycle. I also have another question, and it's just from procurement standpoint. Why do we only have one estimate?
The one estimate is only to get a number for the warrant. It'll have to go through a procurement process, a full-blown procurement process where we have multiple quotes come in.
Okay, so this is not it.
Right, this is not the final, this was just to get a number for the warrant.
Did you notice that people are already putting surcharges on for,
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I didn't
I'll
even,
finish your sentence for people at home.
Yeah.
This is tariff surcharges that we're getting, folks.
and they're not
Pretty
even totally,
significant.
they're not even totally implemented, are they?
I don't know, but this is a pretty substantial tariff surcharge
Yeah,
of
tariff surge about $1,000.
dollars, right?
For what?
$943
Yeah.
tariff surcharge.
That's 20, yeah.
Well, it's-
10%.
Just want to let you know what
The
you're paying.
umbrella's $10 on a sunny day and $20 on a rainy day.
Yeah,
So, you know, the intent of the discussion here was just to go through to close the warrant, actually,
Yeah.
and not necessarily approve it.
let's close.
I'm looking for a sense of the rest of the board here, you know, particularly on Articles 7, 8, and 9, which are the $37,000 police video cameras for dash cameras, the channel grinders for $40,000, and the skid steer for $86,400. Do we want to take a closer look at those prior to them going on the warrant by playing the role of, you know, how much money do we have and how much money do we want to spend
I
on
think you
capital?
have to do 8. I mean, that's just what would happen if those things failed.
Well, the question is, how long are they, how close are they, and why they?
I don't
I mean,
know.
I'd have 1,000 questions about it, Bill. I'm not convinced that,
But if
They're
that's
dire.
how long they last.
I can tell you, they haven't been rebuilt since I've been here. So that 4 to 6 years, I don't know. Mark, do you have any history of them being rebuilt?
Never.
Because that would have come before capital.
I presume so.
Yeah, so it must be, maybe it's a little bit longer than 4 to 6.
I mean, but,
You know, things have projected life cycles.
Sure.
And sometimes, and I don't know the end, and I'm not even gonna speculate, but basically, sometimes things look like they're gonna exceed their life cycles. Roofs are a good example, or boilers are a good example, and then all of a sudden, you know, they just start to show their age. Relative to cars are like this, you know, they're fine, and then all of a sudden, the wheels get a little wobbly. I can only assume, because Pete does such a good job keeping tabs of what the needs of the water and sewer department are, that was the situation. But these are all fair questions, and so my intent was, we shouldn't question the projects. It's more, we can't just say we can only spend money on needed items in the springtime, because that really puts us up against it in terms of meeting certain needs. But things like the dash cam are a different category, and I appreciate that distinction, Richard.
yeah, Stephen, I'm not saying that we shouldn't spend it, but I think somebody needs to ask the DPW, why wasn't this on the spring? If it has a 4 to 6 year lifespan, and we know it was 4 to 6 years 6 months ago, you know, it should have been, it wasn't even on a list,
But
much
Mark,
less not at the top of the list.
The list was done a year ago when it was only 5 years old. Yet you have to remember,
Which is still
they
within-
don't do the list in May when we vote on it. The list gets done in October.
But
it should have been on the
in the
list.
cycle. It should have been identified.
I don't know the answer to that. It's a perfectly good question.
Right,
Yeah.
so at some
Thank
point,
you.
I think we need to ask that question,
And they are going to go to capital too.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I hate it when they say loader experience a major component failure made it cost prohibitive. How much? What was cost prohibitive? The new one's $86,000.
That's the skid steer.
The skid steer.
We'll get the details on that too.
I mean, it would help, Stephen, just if we knew what the decision-making process, because that's the same thing capital would ask, too.
Right, and in fact, if you read, we had in our minutes, in our packet, the minutes from the Capital Planning Committee, and they actually noted a couple of these items, so I
Right.
thought that was.
Well, I remember,
Pretty interesting.
Paul, how many, six years ago, we sold a beautiful skid loader. And then I thought we turned around and bought a new one.
We bought it was the Swiss Army knife version of the skid steer.
But we
It was-
sold a pretty nice unit. It was very low
Okay,
mileage.
so we're
I think it
getting,
was underpowered.
if we will, we're getting into our typical springtime capital
Yeah,
planning
yeah.
discussion. So what I'd like
Yeah.
to do is, you know, recognize that we're here today to close the warrant, and not necessarily approve all these items for the warrant.
Place motion on
As
the
move
table to
forward.
close the warrant.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Foster moved, we close the warrant. Mr. Lowe seconded it. Any further discussion? I'd like to just comment that I think we ought to note in the minutes that we have not approved necessarily going forward with Articles 7, 8, and 9.
Right, we've just closed the
We've
warrant.
just closed the warrant.
I think we talked about removing 5?
And we are going to adjust Article 5 through, by removing the $93,000 of levy limit. Right, Tom, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of closing the warrant? Vote of 4-0, the warrant has been closed. That actually completes all the items on our agenda. We do have a potential item that we have to do following an executive session having to do with the firefighters' collective bargaining agreement that we may be taking action on, depending upon that. And so I'm just going to call for if there are any subcommittee
Yeah.
Are there any subcommittee reports?
No, but you didn't cover announcements at the beginning? And-
Oh, I'm sorry.
And there was an
I
announcement. It just-
apologize, Tom. Go
It
ahead.
was in the the committee notes, and it was about the Long Meadow Tree Committee is going to be doing a presentation at the library on September 12th at 6:30. It's about Long Meadow trees, past, present, and future, and those of you who love the trees in town may want to consider going to that.
Thank you, Tom. And Dave Marinelli, who's the chair of the tree committee, will be here at our October 1st meeting to talk about the tree plans also for us. Okay, so we will be talking about them at that point. So are there any other reports or questions or comments? If there are none, I'll accept a motion to enter into executive session with the possibility of reconvening an open session for the purposes of discussing strategy with collective bargaining or litigation, declaring that the open meeting may have detrimental effect on our bargaining or litigation policy.
So moved.
Motion is made. Is there a second?
Second.
Made by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Lucusa.
She like it doesn't know our role.
Right,
roll
right.
call.
So we need a roll call vote, and so I'll call the roll. Tom?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Mark Gold, yes. So the meeting for now stands it's not adjourned, but it's in suspension. We may be reconvening. Thank you all for watching. We probably will not come back on the air, but we'll report any actions we take in open session back when we do reconvene at our next meeting, which is Monday, September 17th. Thank you all very much.